All right, hello everyone. Welcome to part two of Road to Worlds with the 2015 WGP NA Nationals champion Bren. I'm Michael, and we're coming to you today with a slightly shorter broadcast just for the discussion of the Little Busters decks that Bren tested with on his way to Worlds. Now, this time there are only a couple of deck lists, and if you need to get to them, they're in the previous video or previous article. Should be deck lists somewhere in the middle that say not discussed, but we're going to be jumping into these right away here. So once you've looked over the cards in the list, or if you're already familiar with them, we're going to be talking as if we already know about what most, if not all, the cards in the deck actually do. So let's jump right into it and get to the first draft. So Bren, thanks for joining us again. What was your thinking behind going into Little Busters to begin with? Again, just to kind of recap.
Basically, I felt that Little Busters, along with Televaru, was one of the top 5 decks at that time. And out of all of them, the only ones that I had ever played before was Little Busters. So I wanted Little Busters as a backup plan, just in case that Televaru was somehow hated on and whatever. Slight note, the main reason I chose Little Busters is because its counters, essentially, were complete opposite of Televaru. And I didn't know if you guys were going to publish the article right away in regards to my regionals build or not. So
right, us being 9th CX, and we did not, so...
Yes. So, but in case you guys did, I wanted to have something just in case that my deck got hated on, because my regionals build is really easy to hate on if you really try to.
Right. So, I mean, that's, of course, one of the reasons why we did not actually publish the original list at the time, knowing that, well, you know, that kind of information being given out for free could easily cause somebody to be, you know, targeted or worsen their chances or whatnot. Though, of course, after the fact, I mean, now that everything's out in the open and the meta has shifted and new sets have come, it's kind of moot. So, take us through this first deck. So you said that out of the top 5 that you played with before, Little Busters was the only one, besides TLR, that you had ever played with. Out of curiosity, before we get to that, sorry, backtracking here, what were the other 3 sets? I would imagine that Kantai would have been one of them.
Kantai, yeah, I had Kantai as one of them. I had Nisakoi as another.
Okay. And
the 5th one, I only put in because a lot of people said it was strong. I didn't believe it was strong, but a lot of people thought that Girlfriend Beta was strong. And I'm kind of with a couple of other blogs in that I don't think Girlfriend Beta is that strong.
Okay.
It's just super consistent, and it has good matchups against a lot of the field.
Yep.
But I don't think it's... I think it's just the baseline. Basically, if your deck wants to win, it needs to be able to beat Girlfriend Beta. That type of thing.
That's fair. That's fair, and that's to be honest, that's how a lot of players, at least that I've met, will think of Girlfriend Beta as. Though, granted, it's also very popular in the area too. So I mean, if people just want to have a very smooth game, they'll just play GFB. So, with this first draft, then, what were some of the key cards in this? I know that we were just talking a little bit before about this prior to recording, and I noticed that there is a double shift Chairman Kanata in there at level 2. It's the anti-front attack. Would this be perhaps one of the key cards, or you know, would you tell us what we might want to actually play this list to use?
So a lot of the one-ups in this deck is actually regarding something else. If my Televaru deck was going to be the choice of to be stable, then I wanted this deck to be the tech deck, and that was the plan going into Nationals. So I made this with as many one-ups as I thought would be necessary in the deck.
I see. So you wanted to give the deck the largest range of tech options as possible, while still maintaining some semblance of consistency with your various 3-ofs and couple of 4-ofs.
Correct.
Okay. So, going from this first draft to the second draft, then, if we notice, one of the biggest things is, well, we have the money counter in there, and I know you told me before that it was because you just couldn't find a copy of the Which one was it? Double Shift Chairman?
Yes. Basically, I have been testing. The entire first list was completely proxied, but the second list was intended to be with actual cards. The problem was that there are only two real players of Little Busters in Treasure Chest, and I was not able to get a hold of one of them, and that one happens to be the one that owns 4 copies of Double Shift Chairman. So I had to rely on the other one. I'm not using names because, of course.
Right.
So I was forced to go with whatever he had instead.
I see.
So that's why a lot of the tech options that I had in the beginning aren't there. Like, I really wanted Double Shift Cherubin. I really wanted the Haruka Summer outfit. I still kept the Natsume and Naoli because there's no other reason that you should run that other than it's your burn option when there's all this anti-burn going on. Oh, it's an act. Too bad.
Right. So, I mean, I think it just boils down to a matter of access to cards, and for a series, I guess, as extensive as Little Busters is, and perhaps as rare, it can be card access, or access to the card pool itself can be a real constraint when trying to build a deck. I know that, for example, in our area, Girlfriend beta cards are pretty difficult to get a hold of, and this is kind of a interesting, I guess, issue with some parts of the game, right, where we have a series where the cards are released, so close to the beginning of the game that they might be really difficult to get a hold of, or some people might not want to let go of them. As more sets gain more popularity, it seems to be a little bit less, though there are, I guess, some exceptions, like Terraformers I've seen, which was interesting. Some of those cards definitely do seem to be seeing the upper end of a price spike. So now that we've, I guess, done the really, really high level, I guess, overview of what the decks want to do in the whole macro game per se, in the context of Worlds, why do you think it was important to take something really consistent to the event as opposed to something that had all these tech options, right? What do you think is the upside of playing either the super streamlined build or a super tech build in such a small event?
Basically, well, your experiences really count towards you in this question, because if you are very familiar with all of the series that you're expecting to see, like if you don't expect a single surprise thing, like I don't know, like who expects Melty Blood, honestly?
Yeah, I mean, didn't see that coming, right?
Nope, didn't see that coming. That was my only loss that day. But if you go into a tournament expecting to see a certain number of decks, and your consistent deck is built to play around all of those decks, and then basically the night before you find out that, oh, hey, this is the actually most popular deck, your main deck's probably not ready for that. So your tech deck, no matter what kind of field that you're going to be facing, will be able to deal with it as long as you have the correct tech options in your deck.
Do you think that it's worth the kind of opportunity cost to swing and miss with a really tech option and just fall flat on your face, as opposed to playing a completely, I guess, tunnel visioned deck? Like, for instance, the winner of JP Nationals, or the Japanese Nationals, played SAO, and that was a deck pretty much infested with 4-ofs. It was a super consistent build because he had double search with Yuki and all that. And obviously they didn't show up with the same deck to Worlds, but how do you think that it's worth the risk of playing something that goes completely counter to that? Or, I mean, how would you feel? Like, as a player, I mean, this is going to be kind of a two-faced question, right? Because there's going to be the individual's experience, as you said, but there's also going to be how we would recommend others to actually play, right? So what do you think would be, I guess, the most beneficial for others to hear about, when playing the two?
I think most people should actually disregard the way that I play, and instead focus on a deck that furthers their own game plan, and not worry about the opponent, because your opponent can change, your opponent's deck can change, but as long as you have a solid game plan, they should really stick with that, and I think most breeders will be like that. The reason that I do it differently, though, is because my style of play and my my what I'm strong at is completely different than a lot of different players. Like, I am actually not a skilled player. In fact, I'm very sure I won't be the first one to tell you, but I think everybody except for one person in that entire day that I played against outskilled me at during the game. But the main reason that I won was through analyzing and then countering an opponent, rather than countering their deck or countering their style. Rather countering my opponent, predicting what they'll do, and then outplaying that moment.
Right, so it's basically out-microing your opponent as opposed to trying to outplay them on the macro game.
Yes.
If we're talking about the two, in this context, right, we're going to refer to macro game as the deck building portion of the game where we decide what to play and then what to build, etc. And then the micro game being when you're actually within the game. So what you're saying is it's better to just focus on out-microing an opponent as opposed to trying to game the whole system on the macro level, because that's not worth anybody's time.
No. I think you have it mistaken here. Because a part of it, what did go into the deck building itself, when I couldn't bring Little Busters over, I ended up teching out the Televeru lists so that I could basically face a wide range of opponents. But it also came down not only just to deck building, but also to understanding what exactly was necessary. I mean, you can't really cut your anti-salvage like I did without realizing that, hey, not many people are going to be running anti-salvage, like salvaging tomorrow.
Sure, no. I mean, and I'm just asking these things to make sure that everybody is very clear on, what we're doing. It's not that I'm trying to profess one opinion or another. I'm making sure that all the questions do get asked so that, it's very clear what we mean when we say, this is how we should go about it. So it sounds a little bit nebulous, I know, but this is, I guess, kind of standard journalism practice where we just try to ask as many questions as possible to this so that we can share with everybody that knowledge. Now, if you want my own opinion about that, I think it's very good to make sure that somebody knows exactly what they're doing in the scope of like building a deck.
Yeah.
But I also agree that it's very important to make sure that you know exactly what's going into your deck, and that playing just a deck off the page without prior knowledge can be dangerous if your micro is not very good. That's kind of what people say about, it's kind of the whole net decking adage where it's like, why does net decking not work? It's not because the macro game is poor, it's just because probably somebody's micro isn't as practiced with that deck. And usually when somebody picks up a new deck, just going off of a list, they're probably not going to pilot it all that great. It's very difficult to get to a level where you can just pick up a deck and be able to use it. I know players in Magic who can do that. They're very rare and they're very few, but it's somewhat easier to do that in Weiss Schwarz, to the extent that a lot of the cards and effects look very similar, but there are still so many hidden avenues to find value that still exist within any given deck, that it can, while you can still win games, right? You still might not understand fully what the deck is trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to answer the second implied question, that when you asked that question, I reiterate, I don't think that general viewers and or listeners should follow the way that I did it. I think they should focus instead on a consistent build that focuses on what they want to do rather than what their opponent might do.
Right. And for a majority of players too, just focusing on a consistent game plan is going to be much more rewarding in the long run, because you tend to win a lot more games by doing the same thing than trying to just win by doing that one extra thing in a deck or that one really corner case. It's kind of like if I have a D10 and I'm trying to win by rolling a 5 or higher, or win by rolling a 9 or higher, right? The conditions of which I'm going to win when I try to just roll a 5 or higher are going to be a lot more often than when I try to go for those high rolls. And I know this is really brutal simplification of it, but I think that's, if if somebody really needed to hear it in even more simple terms, I think that's what we're trying to go for here. And that, the consistency will give you that larger range of, I guess, forgiveness in terms of how bad your game can go before your deck actually picks up and, well, saves you through like drawing the right things, etc. But if you're running a deck that's, say, all over the place, if your tech one of goes to stock on the first turn, well then, well, you're going to have to manage that somehow if you have no answer to that, and so on.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, what would you say is the game going to look like? Because we're going into a new season, and we have new sets coming out. How do you think Little Busters and TLR might be positioned for, I guess, future events? Would you still consider Little Busters to be a standby? Because, I mean, it does have quite a variety of effects, right? It has anti-damage, it has, well, the namesake Ricky, it has some things with Clock Encore to be able to get card advantage. And even with TLR getting a second set, would you consider it a viable option to have in the back pocket? And I know this is speculative, but I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think?
I will be glad to take I will be glad to take the two Televeru and Little Busters with me to next nationals if I have no other option. The way that the sets are, at least the ones that have been announced so far, the way that they seem to be going is much more and more finishing again. Puyo Puyo, Schoolgirl Strikers, Televeru second. It seems to be focusing more on finishers again, and there is no deck better with an endgame than Televeru right now. And Little Busters is one of the few decks that basically have the opposite matchups of Televeru. So I think between the two of them, they would cover all my bases.
I see. I mean, I think that Puyo Puyo would like to have a word with your claim about it, TLR being the best at closing a game. But
I still think Televeru is the best at closing the game, though Puyo Puyo is approaching there. Like I don't think they're at the level because Televeru isn't a you can't stop it literally. There's no how do I put this, like no other deck can basically have 9 non-interactable damage in a row right now.
To that extent, Puyo Puyo can still do that as well, right? They can play a +2 soul and they can side you if you're too small and whatnot, and still get off a double burn. And they have much more reason to do that, especially because they don't want to interact with you.
Okay.
I mean, there's a 3-color build that I'm going to actually be posting after this, that I know I'll probably link to it in the description below after that goes up. It's a 3-color build that pretty much feels just like TLR's endgame, but also has a lot more damage to do in the mid game. It's a very interesting build, so I think it might be worth looking into.
I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, so we might have to come back to that once we do the third cast about, well, what really makes WS unique. So,
oh yeah.
yeah, so we have a little preview for everybody for that. The next cast that we're going to be doing with Bren is kind of going into what makes WS unique, because one of the, I think, most dividing questions, right, is, well, what makes Weiss Schwarz its own game, right? There seems to be so many things going around saying, oh, and this has been kind of an evergreen statement with the game, that people will say, oh, it's just luck, or there's no room for counterplay, that kind of thing. But if you look, that's kind of a really big straw man, because you can apply that same argument to Magic and Hearthstone, for instance, which are going to be the other 2 games that we put it up against, and make those games look really bad because of lack of interaction. But in order to be able to do that, one still has to command rather intimate knowledge of the games. And so that's what we're going to be discussing. I think it'll be a really fun time. We'll hope to see everybody there. So this is a much shorter one for today, but Bren, would you like to say anything, or as we wrap up today?
There's not really much else to say right now. There's here's the two decks that are completely off the kilter, besides my animal deck, of course. And yeah, look forward to the next one, I guess.
All right. So once again, everyone, thank you for listening. Our podcast has been brought to you today by 9th CX and Card Academy. Please be sure to check them out for all your singles and product and card supply needs. And we will see you all next time. Thanks for listening.